Everyone talks about getting a Beatport number one, but very few know exactly what it takes. Is it about the music, or are there fundamental strategy around pre-orders, platform support, and building hype? In this video, I speak with Emile Birks, who is the VP of Marketing at the Beatport Group, to show how artists and labels can give their releases the best shot at success. We cover how to get support on Beatport, from staff picks to hype to Beatportal, when to start your marketing campaign, and what kind of content actually works, how branding and social media play a role, and whether streaming and download times should match. If you run a label or you're an artist planning your next release, this insight is what you've been waiting for. This conversation happened at BMC as part of my Blueprint breakfast. It was packed and it was a great morning, and here's the video for you.
Right, let's do this. Hi, this is Emile from Beatport. I just want to do a quick intro, Emile, for the people that don't know what you do and what your role is at Beatport.
I am the Vice President of Marketing at Beatport, Beatport Group. So really what I look after are our DSPs, so Beatport, BeatSource, and we have DJ City in there as well. And I also look across all of our music services, so that's Label Radar and Amp Suite too. I used to work with the producer group of our team, so that's Plugin Boutique, Loop Cloud, and Loop Masters. And I know you're going to be chatting with Simon later today. So that's kind of what I do. Well, that's where I am anyway. My department covers the full end-to-end of marketing. So in my team, I have a team of about 25 people across the world in lots of different countries. Our two main hubs are London and Los Angeles. And I look after brand, creative content, social media, and all of our digital marketing. And really what that enables me to do is see the full end-to-end of marketing. So everything from kind of our brand awareness piece of how do we get out there? How are we making ourselves available to different people who may not have heard of us before, all the way down to our conversion and tracking our kind of sales metrics. Yeah, that's me.
How has the role of marketing evolved for labels and artists in Beatport in the recent years?
Let me put this into context a little bit. When I first started out in my career, I used to work in events in my early 20s. And I used to do the big nightclubs like Fabric, Ministry of Sound, Matter when it was around, and work with some massive artists there. So I did Chase and Status's first tour, so Focus, mainly drum and bass, if you didn't realise. And what that enabled me to do was to kind of see how labels and artists kind of did their marketing there. It was very rough and ready, on the ground, kind of handing out flyers, kind of what you did. This is pre-social media, by the way. And as the music industry was kind of evolving and watching how artists were marketing, that's when the kind of boom of social media happened. So I don't know if anybody remembers Facebook when they used to only have groups and they didn't have pages.
Oh man, yeah.
And people used to create these groups and invite people to come to them. And I at that time had a network of 300 promoters across London, and we used to sell out all of our events. So I remember walking into I'm not going to say which label I walked into, but saying, we can help you with this thing called social media. And they laughed me out the room. They're like, who's this early 20-year-old? She doesn't know what she's talking about. And then a year later, they were begging me to come back into the room and kind of talk to them. And from there, we did massive marketing campaigns for Global Gathering. We did stuff with Creamfields, did a little bit with Glastonbury. And that really kind of was where I started to understand and see how artists were utilizing communities, how they were connecting with people through social, but also in physical. And from there, that kind of led me into artist management. So I was on the management team for Benny Benassi, Crookers, Delta Heavy. I'm talking a while ago now, a good 15 years. But it was kind of in the era where Skrex was kind of booming, and it was really interesting there to see how artists and labels were kind of getting their music out on YouTube. I was like, we've got this other platform here, and now we've got to start looking about YouTube and getting mixes out. And I think UKF really started to kind of bring that boom. Again, I'm talking drum and bass, but in general, they started to create these channels of how people were marketing their music and kind of getting it out. Obviously, Beatport was always a big platform for us because we, as an artist manager, you wanted your music to get out there because you want to get it to DJs, because if DJs are playing your music, others are going to hear it and then they're going to want to buy it and play it out too. So through my career of working with artists and labels and then coming to Beatport and understanding, okay, what is it that artists want? What is it that labels want? And what is it our customers want? We started to drill down into thinking about our kind of core 3 pillars. And I actually think that this is relevant to everybody. We first established our brand promise, which is enabling you to experience those moments when it just clicks. And that can be interpreted in lots of different ways. It could be interpreted as when you've just made that first mix and you're like, yes, got it. Or when you've just created your first track, or it could be your 100th track, or it could be that moment where you drop it in the club and everybody goes absolutely mental. And they're like, yeah, that was amazing. And so how that then is interpreted down to our kind of content strategy is our 3 pillars are see, interact, and credibility. And again, I think that really leans into what artists and labels already do. And so within our C pillar, that's where we think about, okay, in order to connect with customers and in order to connect with DJs and artists alike, we need to be able to be creating brand awareness, creating those stories with people or drawing out the stories within those different cultures and communities so that we can create an emotional connection and that people then resonate with us because they're like, oh, well, I know that story. That sounds quite similar to me. And so one of our really key points is about making sure that we are diving into all of these different areas and drawing out those rich cultural storytelling pieces. And then that kind of connects with our interact space. So when we're talking about interact, that's how do we create conversations in our digital spaces, but also in our physical spaces around key moments. And again, that leans back into our kind of like brand promise. And whether that's through these events that we've now started doing this year with Beatport Live, whether it's through our social media spaces or whether it's through Beat Portal, we want people to interact with us, to share information with us, to share our stories, so that we can then learn from you guys and then we can then surface those really interesting pieces to the rest of the community. And then finally, our kind of credibility side. We at Beatport, the majority of people who work here are DJs, right? We are all in the scene. We all love and are passionate about what we do and why we do it. And we know that people who are artists and labels are the same as well. So that credibility statement is about connecting on a much deeper level with our artists and labels and trying to work with them to make sure that we're doing right by the labels and doing right by the artists. Because ultimately, if you guys aren't here, neither are we. So I was explaining this earlier this morning. The way I kind of interpret it internally is we think about or I've started to say to some people who aren't maybe not DJs, is that we imagine ourselves like the Met Gallery. And the Met Gallery is one of those spaces where they curate lots of different pieces from other galleries across the world. And that's how I see labels. Labels are kind of those spaces where you're these little galleries and you're kind of like trying to make sure that you've got people who are really passionate about what you do and what you're kind of curating, and they come to you for that specifically. So how that all ladders back into marketing is, and the evolution of like labels and artist marketing, I actually think it's got a lot more difficult. A lot of people say it's easier now, you've got social media, you can do what you can do. But unless you've got like a budget, strategy, content, brand, you've got to be making sure that you're talking to community, you've got to be making sure that you're doing X, Y, and Z, it's actually really difficult. And I admire every single artist and label manager that I speak to because I know it's a really, really tough job. I couldn't do what I do without my team. And I know when working with them every day, the amount of passion and love that goes into everything they do. So as before, when marketing used to be quite rough and ready and kind of like on the ground and doing that, I still think that is relevant today. And actually we're seeing more of that like out of home experience. Since COVID, where everybody went online and it became very like digitized, over the last like few years, we've started to kind of trust the real world again. And so you're seeing stuff like billboards, you're seeing more flyers, you're seeing people post stuff for your letterbox. And it's actually quite interesting to see that there's these different forms of creativity in ways of like connecting with people. I actually don't think it's evolved a lot, but I think it's become more difficult to do. And we can talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, that's wicked, man. Let's talk about release strategies. Let's talk about some of these might have releases coming up. Some of these might be labels that have got releases. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about strategies. Let's talk about what, how far they should do about starting a campaign. What does a smart release strategy look like? And also think about how they should target the labels and artists should be targeting their audience, so either by genre, location, or by community. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So I spoke a little bit about this in my talk yesterday about the life cycle of music. And again, this is different for everybody, right? Some can be as short as 7 days, some can be as long as 2.5 years, right? It really depends on the track, and it really depends on how much you look at it. But yesterday when we were talking about from a Beatport angle, the really, really, especially if you're like an emerging label, like one of the best things I would always advise you to do is, not just because it's who we are, but we have Hype, right? And if you haven't heard of Hype, please go and have a look at it. And what Hype does is that it guarantees that your music will be heard by one of our internal curators, right? It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get placed or anything like that, but it guarantees you will be heard. So that's the one thing. The second thing is we have the pre-orders, which are like 28 days, right? So what you want to do is, if you're thinking about a release strategy, we're seeing across social media that there's a lot of this creating that want and that desire for your track. So I don't know if you've been like looking at TikTok or even Reels or YouTube Shorts of how people are kind of marketing their music at the moment. They'll do a short, like 10, 15, maybe even 20-second piece, and they'll be like, hey, do you want it? I'm going to drop it. And they kind of like create multiple pieces of content, sometimes up to 20 pieces of content just for that one track across multiple different pieces. We don't necessarily do that particularly, but for some of our campaigns, we can create up to like 40 pieces of content for like some of our campaigns. And yeah, we did like it. just for context, we did 12,000 pieces of content across our business last year. So it's quite insane.
Anyone else?
Big team. But
any artist out doing 11,000 pieces of content?
But it's such a saturated market. So that's the kind of thing that I want you guys to be kind of thinking about. So the one thing is, if you can create that pre-piece of that and get people to do your pre-orders, right? As soon as release day hits, that's where the first week is where you really get that like lift. And if you get that lift and if you chart, you can then repitch that back in to like Spotify or whatever and be like, hey, I've charted here on this Hype chart, right? Because we've got 12 genres in Hype. And then you can kind of repitch that back to Spotify and then try and get more awareness that way. So it's a really good space to be kind of thinking about that. But again, it's strategy and tactics are two very different things. If you line up your strategy and you say, right, my objective is to sell to DJs and to get my track out there, or if it's to gain awareness about my brand and me as an artist, or if it's to, whatever it is, you then create some focus for you guys, right? So you're like, right, this is the only thing I'm going to focus on. And then you can build the tactics around it. So let's say your strategy is to get more people to purchase your music to get heard, right? So that's the objective. So then the tactic is, right, I need to create 20 pieces of TikTok content, all slightly different styles, but with the idea it's going to be a bit like 20 seconds of the track just before it drops, right? To create this kind of momentum. And then what you want to do is, right, I want to get it through to Hype. So I'm going to do my pre-orders 28 days in advance. I'm going to be driving everyone to Beatport because I want DJs to buy my music, because I want people to play it out, because I want to be heard, so that I can repitch it back into Spotify. And then you use the social media platforms to kind of drive all of your different spaces. And if you've got, actually, does anyone have databases here? Does anyone have an email list for their own label? Yeah? Okay. That is single-handedly the best thing that you can do as a label or even an artist, by having first-party data, because you can also email all of your database with your new music coming now and to pre-order it. And so, yeah, once you chart or pre-order, and then if you chart, you can then do all of that. And then after that, it gets a little bit more difficult. Once the track's out, you probably see like quite a rapid decline after release week. And this is typically what we see. Obviously, there are anomalies to this, but you could take that same strategy for the UK and then do it again in the US, or do it again in Germany, or do it again in Mexico, or wherever your music resonates most. And you can see through, you can literally go on GWI or any sort of like data insight spaces, or look at your audience data to see who your followers are, which territories they're in, to then help you kind of build those spaces out.
I love that. I love the database thing. I think you can. We build databases for our artists with using free downloads, give away some free downloads, and collect the email databases, and then you start building your own data that way as well. And I feel that really works. How much do pre-orders impact your Beatport chart positions at the start of campaigns?
I would say it depends. So, like, obviously, it really depends on the track. Like, if you get your pre-orders up to 28 days in advance, if you're really pushing it and you're getting people to do it, it's kind of like a soft sale. So you've got people adding it to their cart, and then when it gets to release day, it goes through to purchase. So I would say it's really important, because ultimately all you want to be doing is charting as much as possible within the hype charts, because as soon as you've done that, that then forms the rest of the stuff that you do around it. It means that you can go out to press and be like, oh, I've charted here. Or it means you can go out to other DJs and be like, oh, hey, I've charted here. Do you want to like support my track? You could go to radio. You go back into Spotify or any of the other DSPs to kind of make sure that they're playlisting your track. So I do think it's really important, that pre-order, that pre-28 days, especially with the fast-paced nature of consumers and how quickly they are consuming music. By creating that want and that desire for your track, and really, really like, I want it. There's this very typical thing in marketing between want and need. But if you can really kind of gain as much want and desire for your track as possible, much easier you're making it for yourself.
We spoke about hype earlier. Is there a way to get kind of featured by hype or star picks? I know they're quite big for kind of like smaller artists and newer labels. Is there a way to kind of pitch to them, and how do you start working as a smaller label? How do we work with Beatport to get more kind of exposure from the on platform?
It kind of goes through the hype team. So if we work with 92,000 labels across the world, so I'm just going to put that into context. And we yeah, our label team are brilliant, but they are agile and quite small. So that's why I'm saying, if you get a hype subscription piece, you will be guaranteed to be heard by a curator. And that's where you can kind of build those relationships. So a lot of people who go through our hype system, we kind of created like new marketing tactics for some of our hype customers, because we really want to focus on emerging and bringing that to the forefront. And last year we created 29 new social series specifically focused on artists and labels. And if you're from the hype side, we've got Artist of the Month, Label of the Month. So I think going through that subscription piece, making sure that you're heard by the curator, and then having the curator advocate for you. So what our curators do, every week we have a call with our artist team, the label team, and our editorial team every week. And we talk about what's going on Beat Portal, what should be going on social, what should be going across like Artist of the Month, Label of the Month, who do we want to be highlighting, who do we want to bring into the office to come and do a label showcase, right? And so by kind of like getting that and having them advocate for you, that just brings that broader exposure to our internal teams.
Should the campaign start before distribution, and like during the A&R phase, the kind of demo phase? Like if you're thinking about remix competitions, can they help kind of boost a release? What are your thoughts?
Campaign should always start before distribution, 100%. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about Beyonce. And Beyonce can drop a track and everyone absolutely loses their mind, and then she sells out in a second, right? That's a very, very, very rare occurrence these days. Whereas like when I used to work in artist management, there was all this hype around, okay, we've got to make sure that like the day we drop the single is the day that we go live and blah, 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 blah. But actually you've got to do that pre-work. You need to be pre-working like 6 weeks in advance to really like gain that exposure. Even like having a couple of people in your community or DJs who you're liking, and you want to be like, hey, I'm going to drop this track in a couple of weeks, but I'm going to give you the exclusive. But you don't want to give it away to too many people, otherwise like you won't get, you know, charted in hype and all that kind of stuff. But give it away to a couple of like key people, and really focus on that pre thing is more important, I would say, than post. You just kind of catching the tail, right? It's like you're just trying to like make sure, oh, did it connect here, or which audience did it go, or has someone on TikTok like collaborated with it, or like decided to use my sound or whatever. So I think you need to be focusing on that pre-work a lot before you kind of go into the release side, because once it's released, you can't control it. You don't know if it's gonna fly or if it's going to flop. And so if it flies, obviously make sure that you've got everything in place to support it. But also if it flops, you've got to make sure that you kind of got that space where you're like, okay, well, this was a test and I tried out all these different things and maybe they didn't work and maybe I need to change my strategy for next time. So there's lots of learnings. I always say to my team, I want you to fail fast. And it's actually a Google methodology where they get people in and they give them a small budget and they're like, do all of these things and I want you to fail fast. And I always say to my team, you're going to make mistakes, but it's okay because I'm going to support you. So I want you to go try, take a little bit of budget, like take a few £100 and just go try these things. And if you start to see that work, double down on it. Do more of that. Do less of the things that aren't working and do more of the things that are working. So again, labels and artists, I admire all of you because I know how much work goes into it. So I think that comes back to the strategy piece of like being really focused, what you want to achieve, and allowing yourself to have that structure of the tactics to know what you want to go and do.
That kind of on-release thing, I've seen so many people where they'll release Beatport but then streaming not at the same time. What are your thoughts on that? And like, did they go simultaneously? Because essentially 2 different markets.
So, do you mean streaming like Spotify and stuff? Yeah. So, what I would say is, you're right, they're 2 different markets because one's for DJs and one's for the consumer.
Yeah.
You probably want to go live like for the DJs first, right? Because you want the DJs to have your music to play out to then create demand on Spotify and YouTube or wherever else you stream. So I'd probably say you want to maybe give it a week or do an exclusive of Beatport for a week or 2 before you go to another DSP. That would be my advice because, again, that leads into getting everything on hype, having a curator listen to it, hopefully chart. Once you chart, you can then re-pitch it back into Spotify. Spotify then can get it into a playlist and then you release the week after or 2 weeks after that. So I would say that that's probably a better release strategy. But again, I wouldn't dwell on it too much. Like, they're 2 different markets. If you want to release them both at the same time for ease because of time and everything like that, fine. But I think there is a way to kind of like tactically kind of approach it by doing as I just said.
Okay, and then let's talk content. What content actually helps your track get noticed? And can you kind of do collaborations with Beatport as well? Is there content that works that you know that kind of you're then work with the artists on certain formats?
Yeah, so as I said, we just changed up our formats for the last year. I don't know if anybody remembers Beatport from about 3-4 years ago. It was quite Beatport meme heavy, which I didn't really like because that's not credible. And so we changed up all of our stuff to kind of focus on the moments when it just clicks. And you'll start to see that across our content. So if you go on any of our social channels, you see we really like focus on moments where it's like we've got drop of the week. Drop of the week is one of our favorited content pieces, and we have people submit content to us all the time about like maybe they're on stage and they've dropped something and we tie it in with a release as well. Content that works. So when we think about our consumer dwell time has significantly decreased and their concentration time has significantly decreased. That's just the nature and behaviours of people today.
What's dwell time?
Like dwell time on our content or platforms or anything like that. And unless it's editorial is actually increased. But in terms of like video attention, everything like that,
right,
like people's attention span is going down. So the ways by which we kind of create attention is like creating slightly different formats where we've got, so drop of the week, as I just said, you don't hear the drop of the week until about 8 or 9 seconds in, right? So we really try and focus on engagement metrics. So anything that's around comments, shares, or saves. This is it. We don't look at likes. We don't look at how many followers. We honestly don't really care. We care about how our content resonates with our communities and whether we're driving value there. So if they're saving our content because they want to come back to it later because they've learned something or it's set off a light bulb in their mind and they go, oh, I'm going to come back to that later. Great. If we've created conversation. So another piece of content we've done is around some of our ambassadors where we're talking about their story in all of their different regions. Another content piece we've done is around our next artist, where again, we've done stories about them as an artist, how they've kind of come up through the scenes, like what challenges have they come up against, how would they talk to their past selves if they were like doing it all again. So they're the pieces of content that really kind of driving that credibility piece. But what I would say is when you're coming to a track release, and I was saying, about these 20 pieces of content, you probably want to approach it slightly differently, maybe in batches of 4, right? So you've got 5 for this piece, 5 for this piece, 5 for this piece. And when I say content formats, I mean starting with a hook on one section, maybe starting with asking the community a question, right? And you kind of change it up slightly a little bit, and you can maybe change the question slightly a little bit. Face to camera seems to really work all the time. And also when you can show crowds and people being really happy and kind of being together. I mean, you've all seen the boiler room pieces, right? Where everyone's just absolutely losing their minds. So they're the kind of pieces that we're seeing. And actually people are interacting with it because they've either experienced those moments or they've been part of those moments.